What's up, everybody? Thanks for listening to the Whatcast. Mike, we gave up on Nessie a few years ago, didn't we? We did a show about giving up on the possibility of there being a Loch Ness monster.
I think we've done it a couple of times. We addressed it in year one when we did our first bullshit episode. I recall distinctly Loch Ness monster being the reason I wanted to do the first bullshit episode. And I believe we've called bullshit on it many times since then, because unfortunately I've given up all faith that Nessie exists. It's sad. It's a sad day, man.
It is sad. That famous surgeon's photo was on the cover of every book I read as a kid.
Yeah. It broke my heart when I found out that was a hoax.
Right.
Just completely broke my heart.
What year did that photo come out? Was it 1902?
I think it was the 1920s.
Really?
Let's do a quick search. 1934, it was published.
Okay. That's interesting. That'll go into what I'm going to talk about. I wanted to start doing a couple of things that we can cover that are not really things that we've covered before, but I was kind of thinking about covering cryptid counterparts. There's so many things that are described as a certain creature, like Nessie here. You know, Nessie's the classic plesiosaur, right? The lingering dinosaur.
Yeah.
Long neck, small head, flippers, long tail.
Right. And whenever there's a sea monster or a creature in the water somewhere, it's such and such as Nessie, even though that doesn't make sense because Nessie is named after Loch Ness. So call it by its own name. You know, it's like the such and such as Roswell thing. It's Roswell because that's where it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, whatever. I'm just being a dick though. So I'm sorry, continue.
So what do you think about that when that phenomenon happens, when there's something that's a phenomenon or a creature or a cryptid or anything that's seen in one place and pretty much the exact same thing is seen elsewhere? I mean, to me, I think that happening is overlooked a little bit. I love when cultures share a cryptid.
Yeah, I do like that too, but I also have to be aware of the timing. Like if you've got something that was never heard of, but has only been spotted since Nessie has gained popularity, then I'm a little bit more wary of your claims. But if it's something that has existed, you know, before Nessie became famous and still exists to this day, then I think it might be a little more, if not believable, at least there might be something more to it. I know that there's other forms of water cryptids that have been spotted that have been thought to be other potential creatures, like an ichthyosaur or a mosasaur or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's always the persistent rumors of megalodon sightings and all that shit. So I don't know. I don't know. Like, to me, if as cool as it would be for sea monsters to exist, I always think that a more likely scenario would be like the stone tape type hauntings, you know, like where we're getting a glimpse into the past, but nothing, that glimpse to the past is not, it doesn't interact with us. It's just like we're seeing this event take place. And so we're seeing this creature, and it's like it's really there. And it is kind of, but it's like an overlap in time. So we're seeing something from the distant past that's somehow getting superimposed in the modern era. And we talked about this a long time ago. Remember in Texas, the flying stingrays?
Yeah.
I think that's a similar thing. it's some creature from the past, and it was a period of time when that area was underwater, and so people are seeing it, and because it's overlapping time, it looks like it's flying, but in its time, it's just swimming through the water.
Very interesting. Yeah, there's been plenty of cases where places that have said to have been home to a sea monster have been proven otherwise. Coincidentally, while reading up on what I'm going to talk about, there was this lake where there was supposed to be a quote duck-eating monster in the lake for decades. People talked about it, and then one day they found this fucking gnarly. I think it was, God, I think like 14-foot, 900-pound sturgeon washed up on the side of the shore.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so I mean, for all intents and purposes, there was a fucking monster in the lake. There was something there that people probably saw. I mean, a sturgeon that big, all he has to do is swim underneath it and like suck
I mean, you
in.
see that, and especially like if you don't know what a sturgeon looks like a sturgeon really does look like a prehistoric beast. It's got bumps on its back. It's got a weird shaped head. Like it doesn't look like a normal fish. So if you've never seen a sturgeon before, or you don't know what a sturgeon looks like, and you see this fucking creature, it's gonna fucking freak you out, man. Like it would look like a sea monster. So I could see how it would be. And even if you are aware of what a sturgeon looks like and you only see something that big and you just see the bumps on its back as it like breaches the surface, that's not going to look like anything normal that you see. Like you'd see these bumps. What the fuck are these bumps? It's clearly a sea monster.
Mm-hmm.
What else could it be?
Yeah, I remember being a kid and my dad going sturgeon fishing and him telling me it's a prehistoric fish. So if I catch one and I bring it home, it'll trip you out. And if anybody's listening who's never seen a sturgeon, just like Mike said, it looks like a prehistoric fish. It's a gnarly looking animal. 14-foot one swimming by on the surface would definitely qualify as a lake monster as far as a visual, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's I mean, a 14-foot fish of any sort would be a big fucking fish, Like, just as a comparison, like a tiger shark is typically around like 15 feet, Like most great white sharks are in the 15-foot area. So it's a big fucking fish, man.
Well, I wanted to pick Nessie's counterpart for this episode, and I didn't want to pick a counterpart that people would be familiar with or too familiar with. But what I came across was a creature called the Morag. And just like I said before, we all know and love Scotland's famous lake monster, the linging plesiosaur, but people overlook a little bit that there's tons of lakes in Scotland. And Loch Ness isn't the only one that's said to be home to a monster, of course. There's actually a loch that I found that's called Lake of the Beast for its monster in it. Loch Morar is located about 80 miles from Loch Ness and is the fifth largest body of fresh water in the British Isles. They say it's 1,017 feet deep.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
And it's fresh water.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more room for a monster to live, huh?
Yeah.
Known as Nessie's cousin, what we traditionally know as the Morag is described just as Nessie is, a plesiosaur. Long neck, small head, long tail, flippers. And this description comes from a few modern eyewitness accounts, if you can believe that or not.
I don't. I refuse.
Well, I mean, it's a creature of folklore, so the people that live around the area know about the creature. But in 1948, 9 people in a boat all reported seeing a strange serpent-like creature about 20 feet long in the water. So what do you think about that? This is 9 different people all reporting the same thing.
On the over what time period?
What do you mean, like day or nighttime?
No, like was it 9 people together, or was it like 9 people over the course of a day or over the course of a week?
9 people all together. They all saw it.
Okay. So they're all witnessing the same event, so that means that did they all have similar descriptions?
Yes. It was a, quote, strange serpent-like creature about 20 feet long.
Interesting.
Now, when I was reading this, I noticed that this is 1948. And I don't know if you agree with me, but this is kind of when the new age of paranormal investigation started taking place, kind of transitioning from old rich people from the 1800s holding seances and trick photography of fairies made with cheesecloth and shit. Wouldn't you agree, like at this time, with like the UFO stuff right around the corner, folks like Ivan T. Sanders?
Yeah. And UFOs specifically, but I think that there was a little more investigation that went into some of the weirder stuff as well. I don't know what the extent of it was, like, at least from a government standpoint. I don't know if they were interested in anything else other than UFOs, but I mean, there were definitely a lot of authors tackling the subject at this point. But I mean, when you go back and you've got the the Fortean Society and all those magazines that used to come out back in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, this is like what I actually, in my mind when I was writing my notes, I was like, yeah, this is like Ivan T. Sanderson time. Like when that stuff started, he was coming into prominence. And in fact, that's the exact year he started appearing on American radio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Weird coincidence.
Yeah.
Or is it?
I like 9 people witnessing the same creature. I mean, especially if it's a creature they're seeing a creature that's described as something that's supposed to be there, something that's said to have been there for 100 fucking years.
Yeah. And again, when you've got these sightings of creatures that span, over 100 years, it's clearly not the same creature. So what is it that's going on? Is it a breeding population like some people would say? Or is it, like I say, where it's like a haunting? Like your lake is haunted by fucking past monsters. And it's not really haunted, but, for lack of a better term, like if it were to happen in a house, it would be considered a haunting. But I think it's just a time overlap thing. And why certain areas of the world have this where others don't. Like, why don't I have a fucking triceratops in my backyard? I don't know. I wish I did, but I don't. But I think it's just like there's certain places on this earth where the veil is thin between realities and you get visitors coming through like Skinwalker Ranch, like that sort of thing. Maybe it's possible that these exist in nature as well, and it just takes a different sort of form, or because like I think when we look at it from a human point of view, or with what we would consider a human spirit haunting, like a lot of the stuff related to the Civil War, Gettysburg in particular, where people are seeing Civil War soldiers marching and then they just like disappear. I don't think that's the disembodied spirit of these soldiers. I think that it was a moment that was captured in time for some purpose, whether it be a specific outpouring of emotion that occurred during that time that like left its impression in the area, and occasionally we just witness it over again. But I think that's what these could potentially be.
Yeah, there's certain cases, just like the footage you're talking about, the soldiers walking, to where it's not they're not hiding around the corner trying to spook tourists. They're going about their business as if they would if they were alive today, doing what they were doing then. So there's cases where I think that support that. There's an old episode of The Twilight Zone that's kind of like that. These soldiers are on patrol and they basically run across somehow the Battle of Little Bighorn, and they choose to go fight in it, and they disappear, but they find this memorial about all the soldiers who died in that fight, and their names are on there all of a sudden. So it could be a thinning of the veil like you're talking about. And, the monster of Lake Elizabeth, we've joked about fucking Nessie being summoned by Crowley. So, and now we hear a story about a lake monster that's supposed to be from a supernatural origin. So maybe that's something we should consider when it comes to questioning breeding populations and even food sources when it comes to lake monsters.
Yeah, the food source has always been the biggest issue. Like, you have something that big, and if you're going to have a breeding population that's going to support it, you know, there's got to be food source that would be able to feed a breeding population, and not just one individual, because these sightings exist over decades. So you got to have a big, and from a biological standpoint, and there have legitimately been biologists that have examined Loch Ness, for instance, and determined that the food that exists, or the available prey items that would exist for a predator the size of the Loch Ness monster, it's not possible to support a breeding population of creatures that size. And again, you got to keep in mind, if it's a breeding population, this isn't just one family, because that would lead to incest. So you would have to have multiple family groups that are reproducing and creating offspring, which doesn't, if you've got these huge creatures, with some reports like 30 feet long, how are you going to hide a breeding population of creatures that big in Loch Ness?
Right. There would be clear evidence of something like that living there.
And that's why if Loch Ness monster exists, there's a supernatural, or I don't even want to say supernatural, because maybe it is part of our natural world, but there's an unknown element to it. It's not a flesh and blood creature that exists as we understand existence.
I hope so. That's my only holdout for Nessie.
No, I think Nessie's a ghost. That's either that or the fabled Scottish pachyderm.
the Ghost Nessie, new sticker.
Ooh, Ghost Nessie. Yes, I love it.
All right, so we're going to jump from this 1948 sighting to 20 years later in 1968. So this is some time later. Now, I'm sure, what do you think about when we're talking about something like this in this setting? Now, Loch Ness has like a road around it. Now, Loch Morar doesn't, but there is places nearby for people, hotels and shit like that. So I'm sure there's people who had sightings that weren't reported in those 20 years. Like, wouldn't you think so, Mike?
I would imagine. I mean, you got to think. Everybody that has let me rephrase that. Not everybody that has a paranormal experience or an unexplainable experience is going to report it. Outside of like maybe telling a friend or family member, but you're not going to get official documented sightings from everybody.
Right. Okay, so like I said, we're going to jump to 68 here. And a man named John McVarish, he was the barman at the nearby Morar Hotel. He was enjoying the lake doing a little outboarding. And he said in an interview, quote, "I saw this thing coming. I thought it was a man standing in a boat. But as it got nearer, I saw that it was something coming out of the water. I tried to get up close to it with the outboard out of the water, like I guess sitting on top of the board. What I saw was a neck 5 or 6 feet out of the water with a small head on it, dark in color, coming quite slowly down the loch. When I got to about 300 yards of it, it turned off into the deep and just settled down slowly into the loch out of sight. The neck was about 1.5 feet in diameter and tapered up to between 10 inches or a foot. I never saw any features, no eyes or anything like that. It was a snake-like head, very small compared to the size of the neck, a flat type of head. It seemed to have very smooth skin, but at 300 yards it was difficult to tell. It was very dark, nearly black." He's describing the creature there. "It was 10 a.m., dead calm, no wind, and brilliant sunshine. I saw it for about 10 minutes traveling very slowly. It didn't alter its angle to the water. It looked as if it was paddling itself along. There was very little movement from the water, just a small streak from the neck. I couldn't really see what was propelling it forward, but I think it was something at the sides rather than behind it. That's a really nice fucking witness testimony to seeing a creature, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Do you know if there have been any sightings of this thing out of the water?
Not that I came across.
Because if you remember, a lot of the early Loch Ness monster sightings they were reports of seeing this creature outside of the water.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of tracks that were found of this thing. And it's only like fairly recently, within the past like probably 60, 70 years, where it's been solely a water creature.
Mm-hmm. I remember reading about the land sightings as a kid, and that tripped me the fuck out. That thing, I expected it to only be seen in a lake, but to read that it had been seen on land by multiple people, that's crazy. Like, you'd expect something living there like that to mosey once in a while. It might go over here to do this or eat this.
Yeah, and what we know, because a lot of depictions, like we said, are similar to the plesiosaur, but what we know from the plesiosaur, it doesn't have legs. Like, it's not walking around on land and then going into the water. So, like, it almost makes me think maybe it's like a Mokele Mbembe sort of thing, where it's like a sauropod of some sort.
Yeah, I always felt the flipper thing was assumed because it's in a lake, right? I mean, even the photos of Nessie that we've seen, he's not fucking doing a flip belly up, showing his flippers off. So,
right.
I mean, I'm not sure. I don't want to say that those reports of people seeing Nessie on land described flippers, or, I mean, like elephant type legs and feet and shit like that. I don't remember. I would be interested to go look that up.
Yeah, I seem to recall people reporting seeing these round tracks. Or like elephant foot shaped tracks. And then I remember there being like what would be, I guess, the trail of like the tail, if it were to be like dragging a tail, or maybe if it was a serpent body, the dragging of its body. But it's weird how those sightings went away.
Mm-hmm. He's all, they're on to me. I better stick to the water.
Yeah, these fucking humans are everywhere. The only safe place is under the water.
Can't even walk around at night anymore around here.
Yeah. Typical humans. They got to ruin it for everybody.
Especially the monsters.
Yeah, especially the monsters.
You think Bigfoot like spends most of the time in the woods just ranting, all that shit used to be mine. All that shit. That whole area.
Yeah. He points to strip malls and fucking car dealerships, and he's like, my ancestors walked through there, and it was vast, untouched virgin forest. And now these fuckers come along and throw goddamn concrete and pavement over everything, and stupid metal boxes everywhere.
Dude,
fuck you guys.
What if that started the hippie movement, dude? Like, that's what like hippies and naturalists are. They're just shaved Bigfoot that try to infiltrate the human race.
They all of a sudden they just show up shaved, but that's why they still have beards and long hair, because it they can disguise themselves as a human. Hello, fellow humans. How about we save this here Earth of ours?
Sure, I'm with you, but goddamn, you're tall. What fucking stinks?
I am tall. Here, smoke this. I grew this myself in my backyard.
Never mind my gigantic hands and skunkish smell. That's this weed. That's not me.
Yeah, that's weed and patchouli, my friends.
Yep, we're onto something, dude. I think we're onto something.
Yeah, we've got 2 stickers / shirts. We've got hippie Bigfoot and Ghost Nessie now.
Well, moving to the next year, 1969, 2 dudes, one Duncan McDonald and one William Simpson, were sailing in the loch when they were startled by the sound of something emerging out of the water behind them. Simpson recounts to the local press saying, quote, as we were sailing down the loch in my boat, we were suddenly disturbed and frightened by a thing that surfaced behind us. We watched it catch us up, then bump into the side of the boat, the impact of which sent a kettle of water I was heating onto the floor. I ran into the cabin to turn off the gas as the water had put the flame out. I then came out of the cabin to see my mate trying to fend off the beast with an oar, but to me he was just wasting his time. Then, when I saw the oar break, I grabbed my rifle and quickly putting a bullet in it, fired in the direction of the beast. When I watched it slowly sink away from the boat, and that was the last we saw of it. So that's more of a Morag attack. I mean, there was one account to where I read that they thought they hit something, and they looked behind them to, as they passed it to see if they did, but this was a direct quote from him from the press.
I remember hearing a story from Loch Ness where a guy was in a rowboat in Loch Ness at night, and from underneath him, something lifted up his rowboat and then dropped it back down in the loch, and then he just saw a wake going away. He never saw what it was, but something lifted his rowboat out of the water from underneath and then just swam away.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Like, I can't think of anything that would be scarier than that in that sort of situation.
Right. At nighttime? Like, I don't know how many people have been on a boat.
Yeah, at nighttime specifically. Fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, just black water. You're not seeing anything. Loch Ness is notoriously murky anyway. But at night, like, you're not going to see a goddamn thing. And all of a sudden your boat gets lifted out of the water and then dropped back down. And you just see a wake going away from you.
Yeah, that's terrifying. God, no matter what
so
you're
scary.
Thinking, you're not going to see nothing. It's so dark, and that water's so dark. It doesn't even matter if you look. You're not going to see what just caused that.
Yeah, that's nightmare fuel, man. I don't like it.
Yeah, don't go on lochs in the middle of the night. Scottish friends, don't do that.
No, I don't want to discourage that behavior. I just want to acknowledge that how scary that is. Well, if you want to go out on the loch in the middle of the night, by all means, man. And, if you want to invite me, I might take you up on it. But it's got to be a haunted loch or a monster-infested loch. I'm not going out on some romantic getaway. We're not going to fucking hold hands and drink wine. Like, I want to see monsters or ghosts or ghost monsters.
Oh, man. Someone's going to do that. And after an hour, you're going to be like, so, where's this monster? They'd be like, just we'll get to that. Look at the scenery.
Yeah. And then they're going to club me over the back of the head with an oar. I'm going to wake up in somebody's basement and I'm going to be missing my robot leg.
Yep. And the rest of you is going to be used as a sacrifice to the great Morag.
Yeah, probably. And then come to find out that the great Morag is actually some fucking demonic god who is he made an ancient pact with the original inhabitants of Scotland, and there's still a small population that knows of his existence and regularly feeds people to him. So I will become a meal, and then my robot leg will become like a holy symbol that they will rally on, and the priest will hold it and probably bludgeon someone with it at some point to make sure that it's sanctified in the blood of the sacrifice. So maybe don't invite me after all. I don't want to be a part of your fucking creepy cult. Bunch of weirdos trying to sacrifice me. I know what you're up to.
If you're wondering if there's any photographic evidence of the Morag, there is. There's quite a few, actually. The first popular ones was a set of photos taken in 1977 by a woman named Mary Lindsay. And there's tons of photos of this thing you can find. And Mike, I don't know if you want to real quick look up Morag photos and tell me what you think of what they're passing off as photographic evidence of the Morag.
Well, right off the bat, I see one that is definitely not real. I see a blur. I see a wake in the water. I see a very clearly fake plesiosaur. And then I see a lot of artist depictions.
Okay, I got a good video on the subject that I'll put in the show notes, and they got a little slide of some pretty cool photos of what people have claimed to seen there, but nothing like the surgeon's photo. It's the typical fucking streak in the water, uh, mound in the water. But as one sighting noted out, which I'll get to that sighting, I'll cover that. But when these people are seeing these big mounds and bumps and rows of lumps in the water, this one lady made a great point. They're familiar with the wildlife that's there. I don't think any Scottish folks are claiming that Nessie's their famed Scottish pachyderm. I'm sure that's other people who aren't familiar with the area. But this couple saw this mound in the lake, and the husband asked the wife, look at that big rock out there. And she had to remind him. And she laughed. She goes, "This is fucking over 1,000 feet deep. There's no there's no rocks that are sticking out of the water in this lake." So I don't know. I think that's when they see these things, and some of these photos is, you if you read about the area, the lake itself, some of those shitty photos of bumps and lumps and wakes in the water don't belong there. I think anyway.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things that can cause that, like under certain conditions, a wake from a motorboat can travel for miles.
Yeah, for sure.
And you'll see a wake with no boat, and you're like, no boat went by. Where's this wake coming from? But it's just disturbance on the surface of the water.
Yeah. I'll just jump into that sighting. This sighting took place in 2013. Tourists Doug and Charlotte Christie claimed to have captured images of the Morag. Being interviewed, they said, Doug said, quote, "I couldn't believe my eyes. I'm not the type to get excited unduly, but it just couldn't be explained. It was a large black shape on the loch that just looked a bit like a submarine and around the same size." And Charlotte said, quote, "I thought it was a whale. We saw it 3 times in the space of 2 days. Doug shouted to ask me if there was a rock out in the middle of the loch, and I laughed and shouted back that it was almost 1,000 feet deep and there were no rocks near the surface. But sure enough, there was this largest black object, maybe 2, very close together in the middle of a 2-mile wide loch. I've seen otters in the loch, but this was no otter, much bigger and almost motionless."
So it was just sitting there?
Yes. And over 2 days, he saw it 3 times. And the video I have on this subject, they'll show their photos in there too, so you guys can check them out. And in this article that has their account in it, there was somebody else, an older gentleman that had claimed to have come across the Morag in his boat on the loch before, and he made mention that he completely believed their story. And he says that there's tons of people, tons of locals that see the Morag that don't come forward with the reports, which is believable. I believe that.
I don't know, man. It's just, I don't know. I don't know if I'm buying into the Morag.
Well, I mean, a lot of the stuff you said earlier, it's like watching a fucking movie with my wife. You knew exactly what I was gonna. You knew exactly what was gonna fucking happen, and that's what I have in my notes. Then something happened.
And then something happened. All right, now, let's hear it. What is this something?
Okay, so the Morag is known far and wide in the area. It's commonplace folklore for the people who live near there and in Scotland, and even more so people who study this stuff. We know what it is. It's Nessie's cousin. It's fucking a plesiosaur. And the first writings we have of the Morag come from 1887. The writings of a dude named Alexander Carmichael. He is a prolific collector of folklore of the area. And he gathered info on the Morag from the people that lived in the area, the locals. They say he wasn't there for too long because he traveled around. But one thing that he didn't write about is what the Morag was, what it looked like. So there is supposed to be something in the lake. And that was until 2011 when his collection was recently discovered by the Carmichael Watson Project at the University of Edinburgh Library, which contained a complete history of the Morag. And it turns out that everybody got it wrong.
How so? Explain yourself.
Quote, the Morag is always seen before a death and before a drowning. There is a creature in Loch Morar, and she is called Morag. She is never seen save when one of the hereditary people of the place dies.
So she's a banshee.
The last time she was seen was when Aeneas MacDonald died in 1898. The Morag is peculiar to Loch Morar. She is seen in broad daylight and by many persons, including church persons. She appears in a black heap or ball, slowly and deliberately rising in the water and moving along like a boat waterlogged. The Morag is much disliked and is called by many uncomplimentary terms. In a second writing, he writes, like other water deities, she is half human, half fish. The lower portions of her body is the form of a salmon, and the upper part in the form of a small woman of highly developed breast with long flowing yellow hair falling down her snow-white back and breast. She is represented as being fair, beautiful, and very timid, and never seen save when one of the Morar family dies or when the clan falls in battle. Then she is seen rushing about with great speed and is heard wailing in great distress, bemoaning and weeping the loss of the house of Morar laid desolate. The Morag has often brought out of their houses at night the people living along the shores of the lake and the neighborhood of her haunts, causing much anxiety to the men and much sore weeping to the women. So, there is a creature that's supposed to be inside Loch Morar, but it's not this plesiosaur that people are claiming to see. So,
yeah, this is so much scarier.
right? So what's happened here? What's happened here? The first sighting in 1948 with the 9 people and the boats that saw it, it literally is the exact same place that this dude writes about the first Morag sightings in the 1800s happened.
I'm going to say that it's Nessie's fault. And, I'm going to say it's the fucking surgeon's fault. Because, like we were just saying, the Nessie was seen on land and said to, have legs, and it would walk around on land. And then all of a sudden it became a sea monster. And just like this one, this wasn't on land, but it was a very different creature and it served a very different purpose. It was much like the banshee. And then all of a sudden in the 40s, after the surgeon's photo was published, it takes on the appearance of a long-necked reptilian creature with flippers.
Right.
Or a serpent.
Right. Did Nessie's popularity cause the folks that live near Loch Morar want a cut of the tourist money? So they said, hey, we have a lake monster too. Could that have...
Or maybe it was another instance with seeing a sturgeon in the loch.
True. Or maybe Nessie it's only 80 miles away. If he has legs, maybe he just cuts through the forest and hops into that lake too.
And just goes for an 80-mile walk to take a dip in other waters.
Maybe he's a
fucking tourist.
Maybe there's the underground tunnels that they always talk about. And maybe he just swims to Lake Morar. So that left me with the question, what the fuck are these more modern eyewitnesses seeing? I mean, there is photographic evidence and testimony to support the sighting of a plesiosaur-like creature. In fact, in 1970 and 1971, the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau conducted an official survey of Loch Morar because there's so many sightings of this creature. One member...
So,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
It could either be misidentification, which I think is the most likely scenario here, or a tulpa. Or maybe they're seeing the actual terrifying Morag, and because they're only seeing a black bump in the water where there shouldn't be one, they're attributing it to some sort of sea monster. Or, I mean, because a lot of these are just seeing like anomalous ripples in the water or like bumps on the surface where there shouldn't be bumps. It could be an otter or a family of otters. It could be a sturgeon.
But I mean, this lady's said, I mean, she's still from Scotland, even though she was visiting Lake Morar. She knows what the otters in the water look like. That's like saying the people of West Virginia
Sure,
should have believed that
but
the Mothman was the sandhill crane.
I don't think that's the same sort of thing. Because for one, you see a sandhill crane, you're gonna be like, that's a big fucking bird. You're not gonna say that's a 6 foot tall humanoid with red glowing eyes that flies like a helicopter. But if you see this dark shape in the water that's moving and you can't get a clear look at it, you just see this weird, because like, look at what an otter looks like as it's jumping in and out of the water. Like its back comes up and it comes down. They're wet, so it looks slick. They've got long bodies, so it looks serpentine, and they're wider than a snake. So you're going to see this serpentine glistening body come up. You're not necessarily going to see the head. You're not necessarily going to see the tip of the tail. You're just going to see the bend of the back as it comes up and then goes back in the water. And you're going to say, wow, that's wider than a snake. That's got to be a big fucking sea serpent or some sort of serpent-like thing. Not necessarily thinking that it's going to be an otter just because it looks out of the normal for what you're normally looking at. But you might get somebody who studies otters that would see that same thing and be like, oh no, that's just a family of otters swimming in the water. It's not a sea serpent. It's just, they're swimming in a line. And that's been something that has actually been proven to be responsible for some of the Loch Ness sightings. They've shown videos people have taken saying that it is in fact, that this was my Nessie sighting. I saw it and it was this big serpentine body coming up out of the water. And then a biologist looks at it and they're like, no, that is otters swimming in a line. That's all that was.
See, my problem is that the people are reporting, as far as the Morag goes, this shape is 20 to 40 feet long in some reports.
Yeah, but when people say something is gargantuan in size, I don't buy it for a second. We've talked so many times about how people are just complete and utter shit at measuring in their head. So again, you look at the girth of something and you're used to seeing a snake at a certain size. Like you look at a 6 foot snake and it's still going to be like probably skinnier than your forearm. Maybe at the most it'll be the size of your forearm. But you look at an otter and how thick an otter's body is, and you just see one bend of it and you're like, that's got to be something much bigger because I'm only seeing a part of it. But really, the only thing you're missing on the otter is the tip of its tail and its head. So you're seeing most of the animal, but because you don't actually see the whole animal and it looks like it's serpentine, it takes on, your mind kind of fills in the rest. And I remember seeing a video, again, this is a Loch Ness, but somebody was just on a tour of Loch Ness. They were in a boat and they saw this thing in the water, and they're filming it and they were getting really excited about it. And I remember watching it and being like, that's undisputed right there. That is clearly the Loch Ness monster. And it was just this head that was sticking out of the water and swimming. And as you're watching it, it looked like a fucking some sort of strange animal. But then it gets right up next to the boat and it was an otter. It was the head of an otter sticking out of the water. But until it got right up next to the boat, it didn't look like a fucking otter. It looked like it was like some weird creature. And I was like, because in the documentary that this video was on, they didn't explain right away what it was. They just showed this video without any context. And I remember just seeing it and being blown away. Like, that is clearly the head of some weird animal. And nope, it's an otter. So the way that we perceive things that we can't explain, I don't think that our recollection is reliable. And that's a lot of the problem that I have with eyewitness sightings, regardless of how reliable they are. But I also have that same feeling about my own experiences. Like, I've told some of my stories on here so many times, and like I can tell these story, and my story never changes. I remember the story. I remember, the memory in my head, but there's always that thing, like that's your memory. What really happened there? And I don't know. I don't fucking know what happened there.
Interesting.
And there've been experiments to show that humans are shit at trying to describe the size of things, especially things that they're not familiar with. They've also done experiments on Loch Ness with submerging a log and then releasing it as a boat goes by and having people draw what they saw. And there was one person in this experiment that drew it with a fucking curve, like it was curved at the end, like a Loch Ness monster's head and neck. So
wow.
it just, and it was a straight log. It wasn't weird shaped at all. But it just goes to show how flawed human recollection is. And if you're expecting to see something of a certain size or shape, regardless of what you saw, your mind kind of fills that in. It's weird how that is.
Yeah, the Joe Nickel test. I mean, I'll try to find the clip of it. I have found it. I know I've mentioned it on the show before too, where good old Joe Nickel himself. It's an episode of In Search Of, and they're talking about Loch Ness, and he takes a group of people to a lake where he's had a log put in the water and it's chained so it won't float away. And he asks them all one by one, how big do you think that is? And they were all fucking wrong. They were all drastically wrong. It was like a 4-foot log, and we got answers from like 14 to 27 feet. So,
and another thing, just to show like how flawed your perception of length is, those lines, like the lines in the road, the dotted lines, like you're driving, those don't look that long. They're like fucking 6 feet long, each dash in the road.
Wow, yeah.
Like you can lay next to them and they're about as long as a human body. And when you're driving, it looks like it's like maybe a foot, like, like they look small. We're not equipped to really accurately assess the size of things, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that Joe Nickel test is perfect example.
Yeah. Him slapping down the truth on me being so young. I was like, all right, Joe Nickel.
Yeah. No, I remember back in the day I used to get so pissed off at Joe Nickel.
Yeah.
Like, why do you hate everything, Joe Nickel?
Maybe it was back in the day, or maybe because he was crushing our tiny young Mike and Mateo hearts, but he kind of came across
that's
that
what
way.
It was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. But I do think, like, he is one of those guys that seems to get a type of joy out of debunking this stuff. Like, I wouldn't exactly say he's a Michael Shermer, but he's up there.
Yeah, I remember seeing that episode of In Search Of, and my brain can almost like make me fully recall him like revealing the size of the log to the whole group, and him going, "You fucking idiots."
Yeah, you're all fucking morons.
Yeah, that's what my mind makes me recollect when I think of that, and a lot of Joe Nickel. Just like, see, you fucking dummies.
Yeah, 14 feet, huh? What, you think that log was 14 feet? I got news for you. It was a 2-foot barn owl.
Laying down, stuffed, flat on the water. One member of that survey of Loch Morar, Neil Bass, actually saw hump-shaped black object on the loch, and he collected so much info from the locals and their investigation of the survey that it prompted two of the members of the team, Elizabeth Montgomery Campbell and David Solomon, to write a whole ass book called The Search for Morag in 1974. So even during a survey, something was seen, but I don't know. It almost seems like there's more more luck trying to find Morag. I mean, photographic evidence-wise, there's more photos of supposed Morag sightings. There's actually stuff caught by a survey team. I don't know if you saw this. I don't even know how recent it was. It's fucking recent to me, but somebody did some testing of the water in Loch Ness, and they found like enzymes that come from this rather large species of eel.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that, but now that you say that, I do remember.
Yeah, but I also read in the same article that there's not supposed to be any eels there. So that shouldn't be in the water, no matter if it's a giant.
But I wonder if it was like maybe a introduced species.
Maybe Aleister Crowley's got this tiny little portal down at the bottom of the loch that's just shitting out a weird creature every once in a while.
Yeah, they were his interdimensional sex toys. And when he got done, he just threw them in.
Just flushed them down the toilet.
The loch. Yeah. And now they are breeding out of control in the loch. And there's anal eels.
Yeah, all they know is sex. They can't help it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, beware if you swim in the loch. You may get invaded.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.